This is Forrest Gump. And when he was growing up as a kid, he had a pretty tough life. His doctor said he had a spine as crooked as a politician, so he had to wear braces on his legs. On top of that, Forrest would get bullied a lot. Sometimes them boys would even knock him out. But if it couldn't get even worse, a lot of people thought that Forrest was so stupid that his mama had to let one principal clap her cheeks just to let him go to school.
Your mama sure does care about your schooling, son.
But one day, everything changed when Jenny told Forrest to run.
Run, Forrest, run! Run!
Somehow Forrest found a way to break out of his braces, and eventually he would become one of the fastest men on the planet. But people didn't really start to notice until he ran through a local college's practice field, and all of a sudden there was a team that wanted Forrest Gump to play some football. So today I am putting Forrest Gump into College Football 26. Let's see how good he could be if he decided to pursue football, as we follow him on his road to glory. Now, Forrest Gump did not play football in high school because he didn't even know what football was. But now that he was going to college, it was very important for him to stay close to home and be by his mama. But luckily, the school that wanted Forrest to join the team was not only close to home, but they were also one of the best teams in the nation. And ultimately, Forrest Gump would sign with the Alabama Crimson Tide. Now that Forrest Gump was a freshman in college, he was ready to spend some time to learn how to play the game and just get into his college career. But when he came out here in practice and showed that he was able to outrun multiple Alabama defenders, oh yeah, the coaches realized that they were onto something. Because Forrest Gump was looking like one of the fastest players in the country, and the coaches knew that he could definitely be an elite talent one day. But although Forrest didn't play a ton, he did eventually come out sometimes during his freshman season. Like this game against Notre Dame where the coaches said that Forrest is going to take the opening kickoff. Now see, one of the problems with Forrest is oftentimes he runs sideways, and his team got to tell him to go back upfield. But I'll tell you guys what, man, most of the time, Forrest Gump was outrunning everybody. And he did that throughout the majority of the season on special teams. And even though there are times where Forrest would forget where the end zone is and keep running, the coaches were looking forward to giving him a chance to play running back in his sophomore season. It looks like they think if he does well this training camp, then they will move him up to third string. And it turns out that it wasn't long where Forrest would prove that he had gotten better throughout the offseason, and he was ready to get some more playing time. Because he would eventually move up to the third string halfback, and he figured he might start seeing the field more, especially with him already getting better this early into the season. But unfortunately, Forrest was still not really getting much of a chance to play. And on top of that, one day Forrest would find his best good friend Jenny and thought she was getting attacked by some guy. So Forrest had to make sure that he got over there and hit him with that whang, really beat up this dude. But then it would turn out that Jenny was just trying to get freaky. But Forrest would keep working hard at practice to get better, and sometimes he was pulling out moves that the coaches hadn't even seen before. But although the coaches were happy with the work that Forrest was putting in, it would take a few weeks before he would eventually get the chance to move up to the second string running back. And once again, it was not taking long for Forrest to prove that it was time for him to start getting some action. I mean, they were really impressed with Forrest's footwork. But little did they know his footwork is so crazy that when he was young, he actually inspired Elvis. But now that Forrest was finally about to get some playing time, he was ready to get into his next game, as Alabama will be traveling on the road to face off against an SEC opponent, the Kentucky Wildcats. Now, Forrest was actually making an appearance here early on in the first quarter where he was helping his team pick up a first down. The coaches take him out right after, but they did bring him back in the second quarter at wide receiver, and they told Forrest just to run straight. And it turns out that he was able to get wide open before saying, hey, taking some dude's ankles, and Forrest Gump was on his way to the end zone for his first touchdown of the season. Forrest Gump is looking good, and the coaches want to start giving him some more carries. So they bring him back out here in the second quarter where he is finding the open lane, and he's proven that he can be more than just a straight line runner. Bringing us to this very next play where it looks like Forrest is continuing to prove how dangerous he can be as a receiver out of the backfield. He is completely flipping the field for Alabama on the screen pass and brings his team all the way inside the 5-yard line. And although he would again get taken out of the game, he had already done enough to help his team come up with a win, as Alabama closes this one out 27-21, and Forrest Gump actually had a very good game, especially in his first game in the lineup. He only had 25 yards on the ground, but he had 175 yards as a receiver. So things were going pretty good for Forrest, and on top of that, his friend Jenny actually wanted to see him. And he was definitely looking forward to doing that, but right now with Alabama halfway through their season, Forrest wants to make sure that he's doing his best to help his team keep coming up with wins. And he feels like they will if he keeps doing his job in his next game, as the Crimson Tide take on Mississippi State. Now, Forrest Gump wasn't even in on this play, but they made him watch from the sidelines as his quarterback fumbled the ball and turned it over to Mississippi State. They finally would bring Forrest in the second quarter, where he came up with a couple small receptions, helping his team have this game tied up by the fourth quarter, where it looked like they now had a chance to go ahead and take the lead. So they decided to bring Forrest Gump back out there on third down, where he ran a curl route and caught an easy pass in the end zone. Forrest Gump had barely played all day, and out of nowhere, he was helping his team take the lead in the final moments of the game, doing enough to put them at 6-2 on the season with a win over Mississippi State. And I guess Forrest coming up clutch in the biggest moment of the game was all the coaches needed to see, because right after they were telling him that he was getting a chance to move up to the starting halfback. And I'm sure you guys already know, man, but Forrest Gump was ready, and he went into the next practice dominating before finally earning the #1 spot on the depth chart. Forrest Gump was officially the starting running back for Alabama, and this is probably one of the biggest things that anybody in his family has ever done. Well, besides one of his ancestors who started a club where people dress up as ghosts and ride around on horses. But either way, Forrest Gump and the Crimson Tide are now heading into the biggest game of the season, where they will be heading on the road to face off against the #1 team in the country, the Florida Gators. Now, early on, it seemed like it was a great game for Forrest to become the starter because he was doing a great job on the ground. He was softening up this Florida defense and forcing them to add more players into the box, leading to a 4th down and 2 where Bama decided to go for it and get the ball out to Forrest, where after catching his ball, he had the entire field ahead of him. There were no Gator defenders who were able to catch him as he crossed over the goal line for the first score of the game, and Forrest Gump had just put his team up by 7 against the #1 team in the nation. Now, going into the second quarter, Forrest was not doing nearly as well on the ground. The Gators were beginning to lock up pretty heavily in the first half, and even in the second half, where they brought Bama to a 3rd down. And they knew about Forrest Gump's elite speed, so they obviously play off and stop him from getting over the top. Eventually, though, by the end of the third quarter, still down by 7, Forrest would begin to start making some plays, helping his team get down inside the red zone, where on this 3rd down, he is once again stopped. Luckily, though, his team does kick a field goal, and his defense actually came up with a stop of their own, allowing Bama a chance to take the lead in this one as long as they can pick up this 1st down, and Forrest Gump was able to move the sticks and gain a lot more. He helped bring his team down inside the red zone, where he went on to catch the screen pass on the right side, and once again there is nobody ahead of him as he's able to cross over the goal line for his 2nd score of the day. Forrest Gump is making a play in the final moments of this game, and doing enough to give his team a victory against the #1 team in the country, as Alabama squeaks this one out 17-14 thanks to a 100-yard performance from Forrest Gump. Now, at this point, it seems like Forrest is getting better every week, and the team will definitely need him to keep playing well if they want a chance to make it into the SEC championship game. But they still got to take care of some business as they move forward on their season, and now they will be heading on the road to face off against another ranked SEC opponent as Bama takes on the Arkansas Razorbacks. Now, early on in this game, Forrest Gump was carving up this Arkansas defense on the ground before eventually being brought to a 3rd down and 6 where he would get dropped, forcing Alabama to have to settle for 3. But by the second quarter, Forrest was just picking up too many yards on the ground, and eventually he was able to lead his team to the goal line where on 2nd down, he was pretty easily able to cross over for a touchdown for the first points of the game. And it seemed like this score gave his team all the momentum as by the second half, they were still up by 7 points and Forrest Gump was still picking up rushing yards. They were inside the red zone again where on the 2nd down, Forrest caught a pass on the left side before swerving upfield, and he was cruising back to the end zone for a touchdown, putting his team up by multiple possessions in the game and putting him over 100 yards total on the day. But you know what, y'all, that was not enough for Forrest because he wanted to get 100 yards on the ground, and he was accomplishing that right here with this run at the end of the 3rd quarter. And by this point, his team had all the momentum to take control, and they would end up coming out with a 17-9 victory. Forrest Gump had Alabama on a roll as he put up an over 150-yard game on the ground. So Forrest felt pretty great about how things were going for him, but he also felt great about seeing Jenny, because when it turned out that she was trying to get freaky with him, he couldn't even believe it. And unfortunately, neither could Jenny's roommate. But at this point, Forrest Gump is ready to get back into another game where he and the Crimson Tide will be at home facing off against Ole Miss. Now on this opening drive, it was mostly Forrest's teammates who were showing up early, coming up with plays that would eventually bring Bama inside the red zone. Where on this 3rd and goal, Forrest took this handoff to the edge, and there was no way the defender was going to catch him before Forrest puts up his first score of the day. He gets Alabama to go up 6 before Ole Miss would tie it up in the 2nd quarter, bringing us to a drive where Forrest was running all over this defense until they got back inside the red zone. Where on another 3rd down, Forrest Gump this time would get stopped, forcing Bama to settle for 3. By the second half, Forrest was still running all over this defense as he was going over 100 yards on the day. He had his team right outside the red zone where he took a handoff and fumbled the ball. Forrest Gump was turning the ball over to Ole Miss and giving them a chance to take the lead in the second half. Now, luckily, they don't. And Forrest Gump was back to helping his team by dominating Ole Miss on the ground, bringing his team now back into opposing territory. And after Forrest Gump was able to simply dive across the goal line for his second touchdown of the day, he was already doing enough to put this one away. Yes, sir. As Alabama was now taking down the 4th-ranked team in the country, mostly due to a performance by Forrest Gump where he put up over 200 yards on the ground, absolutely dominating Ole Miss, and he did so good that he even had reporters asking him questions. Forrest, you had an incredible game with over 200 yards. What do you think about your performance today?
I was running.
Now at this point in the season, Forrest had managed to have over 900 yards total. He'd only played a handful of games total and was already proving to be one of the best backs in the nation. And that was definitely something that Forrest thought would be nice to become, but he also really wanted to become a champion. And he knew the best way to do that was by finishing off the season with a big win on the road, as Alabama was not traveling far to face off against their biggest rival, with the Crimson Tide taking on the Auburn Tigers in the Iron Bowl. Now it turns out that in this game, it did not take long for Forrest to come out here and say, hey, and spring himself loose, as Forrest Gump was taking this one the distance for a touchdown on the opening drive of the game. And honestly, y'all, it looked like to Bama that Auburn was not going to be a competitive team today, because by the end of the half, Bama was down inside the red zone where a little pass out to Forrest would get him across the goal line again. He scored another touchdown to put Bama up by multiple possessions here in this game, and they would have a chance to add to it further after getting the ball back before the end of the half, bringing us to a 1st down and 10 where Forrest got some blocks downfield, and all of a sudden he was taking this one down the sideline, and he was going the distance for another score on the day. Forrest Gump was dominating his in-state rivals. He had his team up by 3 possessions before the second half, and he would continue to try to keep making an impact in the 3rd quarter, even on plays where his teammates had to tell him to turn back upfield so that Forrest could outrace his defenders and make his way across the goal line for another score on the night. Forrest Gump was running all over the Auburn Tigers, and he had a huge game that helped Alabama close out their regular season. Alabama comes up with a big victory at the end of the year thanks to a huge performance from Forrest Gump. He almost had 300 yards on the ground. I mean, he had never heard of an Iron Bowl before because all the bowls he got at home are plastic, but he was happy to help his team come up with the win. And he looked absolutely unstoppable against one of the worst teams in the country. But now he's going to be put to the test again against the #1 team in the nation, as Forrest Gump and the Crimson Tide earned a spot in the SEC championship game, where in order to earn a 1st-round bye in the college football playoffs, they will have to take down the #1 ranked LSU Tigers. Now at the beginning of this game, Forrest Gump felt like he might have met his match, because he was consistently getting dropped and even had negative rushing yards early on. By the end of the 1st quarter though, Forrest would finally start picking it up and picked up some 1st downs for his team. He brought him to the red zone here on his 3rd down where Forrest trips over his feet, and his quarterback was pissed because that is some stupid shit that Forrest would do. But he also knows that something else Forrest would do is come up with a play. And as the time was ticking down in the 1st half, Alabama knew they had to make one soon. So on this play, they decided to pitch it out to Forrest, and somehow he was able to just swerve out his defender, and just like that, Forrest was making his way to the end zone for the 1st touchdown of the day. Forrest Gump was helping Bama take the lead here with a huge score before half, giving them a ton of momentum as they got the ball back at the beginning of the 3rd quarter. But once again on this play, it was Forrest Gump going crazy. He's taking this one across the 50 and brings his team back into scoring range, where after getting down to the goal line, one of Forrest's teammates actually come up with a touchdown. And it turns out this score was already enough to give Alabama another SEC title. The Crimson Tide take down the LSU Tigers and officially book their trip to the college football playoffs. But now that it is the end of the season and they are SEC champions, it's time for some awards to be given out, as another player from the SEC actually wins a Heisman Trophy. But there were a lot of people who felt like if Forrest Gump, who earned 1st team All-SEC, if he had played the whole season, then he might have won the Heisman. I mean, Forrest Gump had established himself as the best back in the SEC, and he was even being recognized as one of the best backs in the country, as Forrest Gump would go on to become a 2nd team All-American. And you know what? Becoming an All-American meant that Forrest was able to go to the White House and meet the president, where it seemed like he had no problem drinking about 14 Dr. Peppers, which, yeah, that probably wasn't his best idea.
Congratulations. How does it feel to be an All-American? Very good, sir. Congratulations. How do you feel?
I gotta pee.
I believe he said he had to go pee.
But now, ladies and gentlemen, it is time for Forrest Gump to head into the college football playoffs, where they have a great opportunity to compete for a national championship. But they know the only way they can do that is if they can make it past this next round where they will have to take down a team that they have actually seen before, the Florida Gators. Now to start this game, Florida is actually turning the ball over and giving the ball to Bama with great field position. They did push the Crimson Tide to a 4th and goal, but Bama would still come up with the touchdown, putting themselves up 7-0 early on, and eventually they would be up 7-3 after a score from Florida. And by the second drive, Forrest was right back to making an impact in this game, just like he had all throughout his season. He was doing a great job picking up some yards on the ground, and soon he was picking them up in the air. He caught the screen pass and was able to bring his team inside the red zone, where a couple plays later he would eventually get stopped and would be forced to settle for 3. Bringing us to 1st down and 10, less than 2 minutes left in the half. And this Gators defense is paying a lot of attention towards Forrest Gump and is allowing this quarterback to break free, and he's bringing Bama inside the 5-yard line, where once again they are brought to a 3rd and goal where Forrest is again stopped. Florida keeps himself in the game by preventing a touchdown. But in a game where Forrest Gump was now going for well over 100 yards on the day, it was starting to look like he was unstoppable to this Gators defense, especially as he was able to zoom upfield in this play and come up with a touchdown for the Crimson Tide. It looks like Forrest Gump has set the tone for his team, and they might have a chance to put this one away. This Alabama offense is all of a sudden not playing so well. They're having a hard time picking up yards, and Florida would eventually capitalize by tying this game up at 20. But now that it was the 4th quarter, Forrest knew he would have to start saying hey and pick up some nice 1st downs for his team. Bringing us to 2nd down and 10 where Forrest was taking a handoff up the middle, and he had a lot of room to cut right. And just like that, Forrest Gump was gliding towards the end zone for a touchdown. He was making a big play for his team by helping them get the lead back before Florida would just tie it again. And now Alabama needs to get back downfield quickly if they want any chance at winning this game in regulation. And they're doing a good job getting past midfield, led by Forrest Gump, who has over 200 rushing yards on the day. Bringing us to a 1st down and 10 where Forrest just makes it super easy to set up a game-winning field goal. And now Alabama was heading into the next round of the playoffs. Alabama closes this one out by 3 to send them to the Orange Bowl. And they could not have done it without Forrest, who ran for over 250 yards on the day. But as great of a game that was, Forrest knew that he had to keep working, because he had another big game ahead of him. As Alabama was heading into the next round of the playoffs, where with a trip to the national championship on the line, they will have to find a way to take down Louisville. Now early on in this one, Forrest Gump was having a really tough time rushing the ball, so eventually Bama decided to start passing to him, and that worked out pretty well. Eventually, Alabama would get stopped on this drive, resulting in only 3 points. But now Louisville was taking the lead, and Bama knew that they could not fall too far behind. So they would actually decide to go for it on this 4th down and 2. And with a couple crazy leg cuts from Forrest Gump, he was able to get loose. Forrest Gump was on his way towards the end zone to take the lead back for Alabama. A huge play set up by some great blocks from the offensive line, but this crowd is loving what they're seeing from Forrest Gump. Unfortunately, Louisville would tie this game up after halftime, and Alabama was right back in the same position. But Forrest Gump was trying to change that by taking this ball to the left side and cutting upfield for some big yards. It looks like he's already past the safety, and he is cruising his way towards the end zone for a 2nd touchdown on the day. And with over 150 yards on the ground already, it seems like Forrest is starting to take over. Because towards the end of the 3rd quarter, he was taking another handoff, and he was just finessing his way around this defense into an open area, where he ends up scoring another touchdown. Forrest Gump had over 200 yards on the day, and was dominating for a chance for Bama to head to the national championship. And after by the end of this game, Forrest Gump's able to dive across the goal line for another touchdown, it looks like that's exactly what they're going to do, as Alabama would go on to win this game 31-17, beating out the Cardinals in the Orange Bowl to head to the final game of the year. And you know, Forrest Gump doesn't mind a bowl of oranges, but he's definitely looking for something more than that. And soon he would finally get the chance to get what he was looking for, as Forrest Gump and the Crimson Tide are heading into the national championship. And for the right to be called the best team in the nation, they will have to find a way to take down the Miami Hurricanes. Now early on in this one, it looked like Miami's defense was not playing around. They come up with 3 big stops on Forrest Gump to force Bama to punt, and they end up taking the 7-0 lead by the end of the 1st quarter. Bringing us to a 1st down and 10 where Forrest catches his pass on a screen, and he was able to outrun most of his defense before eventually saying, "Excuse me," and picks up a huge 1st down for his team that puts them in scoring range. Bringing us to 3rd down and goal where a handoff up the middle to Forrest Gump puts them in the end zone for a touchdown. And just like that, they are tying this game up at 7 before Miami takes the lead back. And with less than 2 minutes left in the half, Forrest felt like he had to make a play soon. And he started to get a little bit of motivation when he thought he heard Jenny speaking in his ear.
Run, Forrest, run!
I mean, I guess that's all Forrest needed to hear, because soon he was zooming upfield and Forrest Gump was out of there. There was no way anybody was going to catch him, and the entire crowd knew it. Forrest Gump was putting up a score to tie this game up and give his team some momentum going into the second half. And that momentum was definitely carrying over after Forrest takes this screen pass, and it looks like he has the chance to take this one a distance before being brought down inside the 40. Bringing us to a 3rd down and 7 where this Alabama quarterback would actually get sacked, leaving Alabama in a position to tie this game up, and eventually they would have a chance to take the lead. All they gotta do is just get downfield and at least get in the field goal range. Alabama was once again losing in this game, but Forrest Gump was looking to change that by taking this one to the right side, and he was able to get around defenders and up the sideline where he is gliding towards the end zone for another touchdown on the day, giving his team a chance to take the lead again, but for like the 5th time it seems like Miami just takes it right back. And now Alabama had less than 2 minutes left to get into field goal range and win themselves a national championship. And they were definitely in good position to do so after Forrest hits the defender with some crazy shit. I didn't even know Forrest Gump can do that. But with around 20 seconds left, one of Forrest Gump's teammates comes up with a play, bringing Bama into field goal range and allowing them to wind down the clock to kick a game-winning field goal to win the national championship. The Alabama Crimson Tide get the job done, closing this one out 27-26. Led by Forrest Gump, they're able to win a natty and bring a title back to Tuscaloosa. And after an incredible sophomore season, I'm pretty sure this will be a time where Forrest Gump will always look back on. Because after a year where he put up over 1,600 yards on the ground, with almost 600 yards receiving while only playing 12 games in the year, people know he would have been able to break some records if he actually played the full season. But although Forrest had a great year, he's not too sure about what he wants to do in his future. He doesn't know if he wants to stay at Alabama, go to another school, or potentially even go to the Army. Forrest was definitely going to have some decisions to make, but I'll leave that decision up to you guys. If you want to see a part 2 of Forrest Gump, be sure to get this video to 1,000 likes and subscribe to the channel down below. Also comment down below who or what else you guys want to see next, and YouTube thinks you'll like one of these other videos until the next one comes out. If you're watching at this point, just know that I appreciate you. Hope you have a great weekend, and other than that, I'm going to catch you guys next time.